Diversity Church. We're talking about Vanity Fair. Some people don't know what to do with that video when it's playing. Everyone's kind of like, what am I supposed to be thinking? That was the whole idea. It's supposed to confuse you. It's supposed to mess with you because that's what Vanity Fair will do to you. See, we're talking about this metaphoric fair that we live in and we live around here in this world. It's like the world's fair, and all it does is it sells us empty pleasures and it promotes vain delights. I mean, it tells you, oh, come and check out this thing. This is going to satisfy you. This is going to please you. This is going to make you happy. This is what you need. This is what you want. And there's lights and there's cameras and there's action. But then once you buy it and once you start taking in and taking part of it, it just leaves you feeling vain, empty, meaningless. It's like, man, this did not do for me what it said it was going to do. We've been talking about, and we will talk about King Solomon and Ecclesiastes. He took part of this fair a lot in his life, and one of the things that he said in Ecclesiastes 1:2, he said it's all vain. It's all vanity. He took part of all of its goods. He bought the goods. He played the games, like we talked about last week, the peep show. He ate the food. He won the prizes. And in Ecclesiastes 1:2, look what he says. This is what he says in Ecclesiastes 1, chapter 1, verse 2. We got it? Ecclesiastes 1:2. There we go. It says, vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I think he was trying to set the record of how many times he could say vanity in a sentence. But what he's saying is, he says, man, Vanity Fair, everything that this world has to offer, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, everything it says is good, everything it says you should have, he says it's all vain. That means it's empty. It doesn't have any power to satisfy you. It has no power to fulfill you. It's all empty. It's all vain. That's exactly what it is. So I'm here in this series to uncover the vanity, to show you exactly what this world has to offer, and I'm here to tell you how to live a more meaningful life. I'm showing you what is meaningless, and I'm saying, no, here's something that you could live for that is meaningful. Does that make sense? So we're setting the record straight. Today we're continuing in this series with a message in light of Labor Day called the Carny. The Carny. Now, does anybody know what a carny is? A few people know what a carny is. Now, remember, we're talking about Vanity Fair, so if you don't know what a carny is, just understand we're talking about the fair, so it probably has something to do with that. It actually does. A carny is the term for a person who travels and works at a carnival or a fair. They go from fair to fair, carnival to carnival. They live there. They spend their time there. I mean, everything, their whole life revolves around the fair. Well, in light of Labor Day and what we're talking about in this series, talking about how things are vanity, I couldn't think of a better topic to talk about than to talk about all of our work, our jobs, what we do for a living. And let me tell you something. King Solomon, he has something to say about that. He tried to work at Vanity Fair, and let's read what he says about this. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 17, the Carny. Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. Let me just pause right there. Who in here could say, I hated life because of my job at one point or another? Okay, pretty much everybody. I hated life, man. Like, hashtag hate life because of my job. If that is you or if it hasn't been you, that means this message is for you this morning. That's exactly what King Solomon felt when he worked at Vanity Fair. He felt like this carnival worker. Look what it says, for all is vanity. It's like grasping for the wind. The King James, it says vexation of spirit. For those who don't really know how to interpret King James, let me just interpret it for you. It literally means like an annoyance to my spirit. You know, you were made your spirit first. That's how God made you. And the Bible says when we worship God, we must worship him in spirit and in truth. It's because it's only him and it's only his spirit that can satisfy the deepest part of who you are. Did you hear me? So anything else, including work or the peep show like we talked about, or money like we will talk about, anything else in this whole world, it doesn't have the power to satisfy the spirit of man. It's only God that has that power. And that's why everything else to Solomon, he realized it's all vain. It's all empty pleasure. It's all empty delights. It has no power to satisfy me. Solomon Through all the work that he did, and he was a king, and he did a lot of work. He didn't just work as a king. He worked in his field. He was a laborer. He built vineyards, and he built houses, and he built all these things. He literally felt, through all the work that he did, like he was working for Vanity Fair, doing a lot that was grievous, taxing, toiling, but never something meaningful. Does anybody relate to that this morning? Man, you feel like you're working hard. You feel like you've been working hours upon hours. You feel like you've been just putting in the work and doing the grind, and you still feel like, man, what am I doing this for? Why am I here? Why am I working like this? And I don't feel like it's satisfying me. I don't feel like I'm doing what I need to be doing. Well, today, I have for you 3 ways to make your job, your work, more meaningful. All right, if you feel like it's vain, you feel like it's empty, you feel like, man, you're just not satisfied in what you're doing for work on a regular basis, you might be a teacher, construction worker, you might be a stay-at-home mom. Listen, I'm going to tell you 3 things, how to make your work more meaningful. Who's ready for this message today? I actually might do this 2 weeks in a row because as I was studying, there was much more than 3 things to do to make your work more meaningful. But today I only got 3 for you. We'll see if God lets me share with you the next 3 next week. So the first point, the first way to make your work more meaningful is to prioritize your work in its rightful place. Everybody say rightful place. So carnies, those who work at the fair, they basically eat, breathe, and live the fair. The fair is their number 1 priority. Matter of fact, if you are a carny, you are not going to have a life outside of the fair. Literally everything that you're doing in your life is going to be revolving around the fair. You literally work so much there. Everything you're doing is focused on, either you're running a game or you're handing out some corn dogs or whatever, and that is your life. You don't have time for your family. You don't have time for your friends. That is what you do as a carny. But that's a lot of how you and I work. I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen it over and over again in counseling. I've seen it over and over again as I'm talking to people. You can have work be an idol in your life. You can have work to be the thing, man, that you're living for. You can have work be that thing where you're just grinding because you think that's your top priority. You think it's the number 1 thing in your life. And many people do that. Maybe you don't do it consciously, but you do it subconsciously. And so everything in your life is revolving around work. How meaningless? How meaningless is that? How meaningless is it if you're just working all the time and that's your number 1 priority and you can't even enjoy the fruit of your hard work or the meaningful relationships that God actually has placed in your life? Listen, work should never be your number 1 priority, ever. Work, the things that we do for a living, the things that we spend most of our time on doing, it should never be our number 1 priority. Solomon said it's vanity, and if he did it all of his life, and at the end of his life he's telling you it meant nothing, I think we should take note of that, and we start thinking, maybe I should think that there's something more meaningful out there than just work. God created you first. Your number 1 priority is to worship and serve the living God. That's the number 1 priority, and you could do that through work, but he needs to be your center. Jesus needs to be your number 1. We talked about it last week. You were made by him and you were made for him. Not for work, not for anything else. You were made by him and you were made for him. So he needs to be your number 1 priority. I got something for you to tweet. You know how I do that sometimes in church. I want you to tweet this. I want you to remember it. I want you to meditate on this. Life is most meaningful when God is our number 1 priority. We're talking about things that are vain, empty. I'll tell you, the thing that will make your life more meaningful is when God is your number 1 priority. When we live that type of life, when we focus on God first, it seems like everything else then does fall in order. I'm telling you, we're made by him and for him. In him, we all consist. The Bible says in him we live, we move, and we have our being. So he has to be our number 1 priority, or else all of life will be meaningless, including our work. Well, what's the second then priority? I don't think it's work either. Matter of fact, I think it's your loved ones in your life. And if you're married, it's specifically your spouse. They should be your number 2 in your life. That should be your second priority. See, God didn't make us for work. He made us for him, but he also made us to have relationship with others. And he made us to have meaningful relationships. See, we're talking about vanity and things that are meaningless. What's meaningful are the people that he has placed in your life. And if you're married in this place, your spouse, that relationship should be the most significant relationship you have outside of your relationship with Jesus Christ. Can I tell you something? God, the first institution, the first organization he created, it wasn't the church. It was the family. It was marriage. You find meaning in that. You find purpose in that. It's something more significant than what you do for a living. It's something that goes beyond that. And so your spouse should be second. How about third? If you have kids in this place, your kids should be number 3. So it's God first, your spouse second, and then your children third. Your children should come before your job. I might be stepping on some toes in this point. I said your children should come before your job. But oftentimes our job becomes our number 1 priority. Our spouse loses out in that deal. Our kids lose out in that deal. And then all these things that God created you for to have a meaningful life, something that's going to last beyond this earth, beyond this time here, something that you can take with you, your spouse and your kids, for all of eternity, you can spend together with them in heaven. That is something more meaningful. So God says prioritize that in your life. I've seen too often times that people just don't prioritize their kids and they're working, so they don't play with them, they don't spend time with them, they don't go to their functions. You wonder why your kids are rebelling. They're trying to get your attention. They're trying to say, Mommy, Dad, I want to spend some time with you. And if you're not paying attention, I'm going to go find somebody that's going to pay attention to me. I'm going to go find somebody that's going to show me some attention. I'm going to find somebody that's going to prioritize me. God says, no, you got these kids. I've given them to you. You prioritize them in your life. You spend time with them. You go to their basketball game, their football game, their baseball game. You prioritize them before your work because they're more meaningful than anything on your job. And if you're not married in this place, maybe you're a single person, remember this point because this is how you're going to find a meaningful marriage. But outside of that also, just remember there's meaningful relationships you have. Prioritize those before your work. And then fourth, then we can get to the fourth thing that we were to prioritize. Maybe then comes work, okay? Then you can prioritize work because it is something important. It's something that we all do. It's something we spend a lot of time on. Most of us work a 40-hour job at least. Some of us a lot more. I'm going to get to that in my next point. But we should have a meaningful work life, and we should do something that we're satisfied in. We should do something that we take pleasure in outside of just our relationships, because God created us with gifts, and He created us with talents, and He wants us to use those. But I want you to think about this. For some people, maybe you prioritize work like 10 in your list of priorities. Maybe it's 10th. Maybe it's after video games or movies. You have those and those are like second and third or fourth on your list. Well, listen to me, that's meaningless too. That's meaningless too. The Bible says if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. It says, matter of fact, if you don't work, you're worse than an unbeliever. Okay, we'll let that sink in just a little bit. Solomon, he said this, so it's not like he's saying all of work it has no meaning. He just wants it to be in its rightful place. He says, go to the ant, you sluggard, and learn of her ways. An ant, it works a lot. An ant provides for its family. An ant goes, you see him, an ant goes marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. You know, they're working. They're doing stuff to provide for his family. So Solomon, in one part, in Proverbs, he says, go to the ant. Learn of the ant's way. He's working a lot. So it's not like he's saying, man, work isn't meaningful at all. He's saying just put it in its rightful place. Don't prioritize it beyond the meaningful relationships, God first, and the people that He's called you to do life with second. And then you could have work and put it in its rightful place, and it's going to be good. Ecclesiastes 3:9 says this. He's talking about this here. Ecclesiastes 3:9, he says, what profit is there to the worker from that in which he toils? What profit does he have? This reminded me of the scripture in the New Testament in Mark 8:36. It says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Think about this. Let this sink in. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his family? We're talking about something that's more meaningful. We're talking about something that is greater. We're talking about something that you can take with you. We're talking about prioritizing your work in the right place. I've seen it time and time and time again. People put their job before their family, before their spouse, before their kids, and their lives are a wreck because of it. God has called you first to prioritize Him and then prioritize them. And then you can prioritize your work. Let me talk to you about the second way to make your work more meaningful. The second way is to take a day off every week. I'm getting all up in your business, literal business today, okay? Take a day off every week. Now, I was researching Carnies to see how much they work. I just was curious. I saw that often they work 14-hour days, 7 days a week. 14-hour days, 7 days a week. What a meaningless life. What a meaning. Literally, you wake up, you're working, you go to sleep. You wake up, you're working, you go to sleep. You wake up, you're working, you go to sleep. That is the sum total of your life. Can I tell you something? You weren't meant for that. You weren't made for that. God actually set an example from the very beginning of creation for all of us. He made all of heaven and all of earth in 6 days. And what did He do the seventh? He rested. Is it because God needed to rest that He rested? Come on, He's God. He could do anything and everything all the time. He didn't need to rest. He didn't need to say, you know what, I'm going to kick back in my recliner because I'm tired. That's not God. That's not who our God is. He's all powerful. That means He never runs out. His battery never goes to empty. His gas tank never goes to E. So it's not because God had to rest that He rested. It was because He was setting an example for us because we need to rest. We need to rest. And matter of fact, that Old Testament rule of the Sabbath day, just because we live in the New Testament, doesn't mean it's not applicable. It's still applicable today. It's still important for us today. I am telling you in here, if you will just pay attention to what I'm saying, if you will learn to take a day and rest from your labors and rest from your work life will be more meaningful. You're sitting there, you're giving all of your attention and all your energy and all your work to the things that you're doing, and you're still saying, man, it's not fulfilling me. I'm telling you how to get a more meaningful work life. It's if you would take a day off a week. Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says there's a time for everything. Look at this, Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season, time for every purpose under heaven. And then he goes on, there's a time to live and a time to die, and there's a time to sow and there's a time to reap. And he goes on, he's talking about all these things. There's a time to work and there's a time to rest. You with me this morning? I said there's a time to work and then there's also a time to rest. And I'm telling you today that one day a week is that time for you to rest from all of your hard work, from all of your labors. This is an example that God showed. And if He shows it, I think it's meaningful. I think if God set this out at the beginning of all creation, and He knows everything, and He's all powerful, I think He knew a little bit about our lives. I think it's important for us not to just go to what Vanity Fair and this World's Fair has to tell us what's going to make us happy and satisfied. I think we should go to God, who we were created by and created for, to tell us what will make us happy and what will make us satisfied. He says, take a day off. Take a day of rest. Take a day of worship. Take a day of reflection. Take a day to rest from your labors. My day is Mondays. Now, as a pastor, Sunday is not my day of rest. It's a day of work. It's a day of hard work. Most weekends are for me. So it's not just Labor Day that I take off on Mondays. My day off, so don't contact me. Don't email me. Don't call me. And if you do, if I don't respond, there's a reason. I'm taking my day off. I'm taking my Sabbath. I'm taking my day of rest. That's my day. It's on Mondays. And when I do this effectively, and I'm not 100% perfect on it, just ask my wife. I was talking about a time to work and a time to rest. She tells me that all the time. And when I'm working at 10 p.m., working on my emails, she says, you've been working all day. It's time to cuddle with me. There's a time for everything. Cuddling with your wife is one of those things. But when I do this effectively, when I literally take that day off and I really rest, and I really just sit back and relax, and I enjoy my family, and I enjoy the things that God has blessed me with, I have found that my weeks and my work the rest of the week is so much better. Matter of fact, I have found that it actually gives me energy for the rest of my week. I've found that when I effectively take a day off and really just unplug and unwind, that it actually makes me more productive the rest of the 6 days than if I worked all 7 days. Are you with me this morning? I'm telling you a better way. I'm telling you the way of the master. I'm telling you the way that God created us. I'm telling you a meaningful life and a meaningful existence versus a meaningless one. I think a great example of this is Chick-fil-A. How many of you guys know Chick-fil-A? Who's a fan of Chick-fil-A in this place, all right? Chick-fil-A, instead of following the model of almost every other fast food company out there, they work a 6-day week. They're off Sundays, and sometimes we're upset about it. You know, you're craving a chicken sandwich, and you want to go to Chick-fil-A, and it's like, dang, man, it's Sunday. It's closed. Well, I read from businessinsider.com that Chick-fil-A is dominating the fast food market. Each store, the Chick-fil-A stores right now, per store, they are making more money than any other fast food chain. Think about this. They dominate in 6 days more than 24/7 working McDonald's out there. There's something to be said about this. This is a spiritual principle, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, if Chick-fil-A can dominate if they take a day off, I'm telling you, you can dominate if you take a day off. I'm telling you, you'll be more productive if you take a day off. You'll be a better husband, a better wife, a better father, a better mother, a better friend if you would take a day off. And you'll also be a better worker. You won't be so tired. You won't be so worn out. You'll actually recognize that 24/7 working is not what you were meant for. You weren't meant to be a Carny and Vanity Fair. You're meant to be a worshiper of God and a lover of your family and to serve Him and to love others. That's what you were meant for. I thought that would make somebody excited in this place, but maybe you're still idolizing work. I still got a third point for you, okay? The third way to make work more meaningful is work for and unto God. Make God your boss. See, Carnies, they work for people who own the games, they own the rides, they own the equipment, but these owners pay them very little, and these owners ask for a lot. You know, I'm already talking to you, man. You've been feeling like that in your workplace, man. I've been working like that. Well, a more meaningful way to work is make God your boss. Did you hear me this morning? This is going to set somebody in here free. Somebody that has been working for that boss who has been like a slave master, cracking that whip and telling you, and you feel, man, like they are crazy and they're asking all this of you and you feel just miserable in that workplace because of them. Let me tell you something. God can be your boss. Not only can God be your boss, He wants to be your boss. And this boss, He's not like a slave master. He sees everything you do, and He will reward you for it. He's a God that sees your faithfulness, and He sees your hard work, and He sees your effort. And when you begin to work for Him, He'll take care of it. I remember in one of my jobs, I was working for a crazy person. Okay, listen, I know you can relate to me. I was working for a crazy person. And I felt every time I went into work, man, it was like, oh, I got to deal with this person again, man. And it felt like, you know, the meetings, those meaningless meetings that you have, like there's no point for that meeting. And it's like, it keeps on going. It's like, why did we have this meeting? What happened? Because, I mean, it's like, that was the type of person that I was working for. This person, man, it made me like, okay, I won't get into all that. What I realized was there's a more meaningful way to work in this environment. It's when I make God my boss. So instead of just reporting to this person, even though I did, I started reporting to God. Instead of just having a meeting in the morning with this person, I started having a meeting with God. I started getting my orders from headquarters. I started getting my orders from somebody that is higher than that boss. I started getting my orders from somebody that knew a little bit more than this person. And so I started submitting to God. And I said, God, okay, I see that you are higher than this boss, and I see that even my work can be worship to you. And so today, I'm dedicating my work day to you. Today, I'm saying, God, what do you want in this workplace today? What do you want me to accomplish today? And as I began to do that, it was like working for that person became a little bit easier. I'm telling you, God says this in Colossians 3:23. Look at what He says. He wants you to work for Him. Whatever you do, Work at it with all your heart as working for the what? As working for the Lord, not for human masters. Let God be your boss. And work to him. And work unto him. I tell this to Christians, listen, you should be the most hard-working people on the face of the planet. Amen. Why? Because your boss is the Lord and Master, Jesus Christ. Did you hear me today? It says whatever you do, work with all your heart. Why? Because you're working for the Lord. So yeah, you might have a bad boss, and you might have a boss that's taking advantage of you. You might have a boss that is cracking that whip, and you might have a boss that's just affecting your peace. Well, change it. Change it up. God, I'm going to work for you. And I'm going to dedicate my day to you. And I'm going to dedicate my time to you in this workplace because I know that you have a better way. And you know all of my coming, and you know all of my going, and you know all of this. And so I'm going to just dedicate this to you. What would you think will happen to your production if you will have a mindset like this? I'm telling you, you will go to the next level. And it's only a matter of time before you'll be promoted because God sees it all. The Bible says if you are faithful in the little things, God will give you more. When you dedicate your life like this to God, when you dedicate your work like this to God, it's worship unto him. He sees it all, and it's only a matter of time before he makes a way, and you'll become the boss, and you'll become the person that has people under you, and then you're going to be able to treat them like God treats you, right? And you'll be a good boss. This is the way of the master. This is the way of having a good work. 1 Corinthians 15:58 says this. Look at this. We're talking about Vanity Fair. It says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. So always be doing the work of who? That means you could do that work even in your workplace. That means he actually has work for you to do on Monday, not just on Sunday when you come to church. Sunday's your day of rest. You're just receiving from the Lord. Monday's your day of work for the Lord. That's the day where he's telling you, I got work for you to do. So he says, always be abounding in that work, knowing that your labor is not what? In vain. We're talking about Vanity Fair. Your labor if you work for God. If God is your boss, if you're getting your orders from him, your labor will not be in vain. It will not be meaningless. It will be meaningful. Do you hear me today? If he tells you to go and talk to your coworker about some things, talk to your coworker. If he tells you to show up on time, which he will, show up on time. I believe that Christians should be leading the way because we're working for the Lord, our Master, Jesus Christ. If he's saying give it all, you give it all. He's saying work hard for him. Do it unto him. Let your testimony be to the world that I'm working for my Lord. Man, if you name the name of Christ and you're coming in late, and you're dragging your feet, and you're working just a mediocre way, that's going to be meaningless too. But man, when you start working hard and you start working for God, knowing that he's your master, and you start putting it all in for him and you start giving it all, you're not like cheating your boss by, not clocking in on the right time and all that kind of stuff, and you're not wasting time and by just searching Facebook while you're at work and all those other things. I told you I'd be stepping on some toes this morning. When you're working for God, saying, God, I am here for you, and I'm here working for you, and I'm going to give it all to you because you are worthy and you gave it all for me. He's going to see that, and he's going to reward you, ladies and gentlemen. That's a more meaningful way. So then it doesn't matter what boss you have in the natural. It doesn't matter what boss you report to, because you got a higher boss that you report to every single day, and he will give you orders, and he'll give you direction. So how to make your work more meaningful? Prioritize it rightly. Take a day off every week. And by the way, if you say, man, I can't take a day off because my job won't let me, get a new job. I was preaching a message like this one time, and a gentleman came to me afterwards. He said, man, my job has just been so overwhelming. It's been so intense. He said, I'm making great money, so I feel like I can stay there. Come on, we're going to talk about money not being meaningful, how it's vain too in a lot of ways. But he was saying, man, it's hard on my family. I just don't have time. I feel stressed. I'm working every single day, 7 days, 24/7. I said, get a new job. He said, oh. You mean I could do that? Yeah, you could do that. There's a lot of jobs out there that won't make you work 24/7. He said, well, it probably won't pay me the same amount. He comes back to me. In his workplace, he had a job that he could take that was lesser than what he was working in management, and that's why he was working all the time. He could take a job that was a little less. He was going to get paid a little less, but he also was going to have weekends off. I said, take it. He took it. He reported back to me. He said, dude, it was the best decision I've ever made. I'm at peace now. I feel joy. I feel rest. I'm spending time with my family. I'm telling you, a more meaningful way. So prioritize it rightly. Take a day off and let God be your boss. Come on, don't work for Vanity Fair. Work for the Lord, and your work will be much more meaningful. Why don't you bow your heads and close your eyes today?